usually our greatest weaknesses are hidden in the shadows of our greatest strength, right? So it's like your greatest strength is you on 10. Some of your greatest weaknesses are you on like 13. Welcome back to another Spiritual DNA Zoom session. Pastor Daron Earlewine here as your host. Stoked to have a good friend of mine on the podcast today, and Matt Griffey. Welcome to the Spiritual DNA Zoom sessions, my friend.
Thanks, Darren. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. We Matt and I have never hung out in this context because we're usually winning, championships in every youth sports, situation that we find ourselves in, or at least making it to the championship.
That's right. I like winning better. We win them.
Me too. So Matt and I have become friends for the past few years. My youngest son and his oldest son have played sports together, basketball, football, baseball. And it's been a joy to be able to coach with Matt. And Matt, it's been awesome, man, just to get to know you, to be able to walk alongside you as a coach and as a friend, as a dad. And so, man, it was just so awesome for us to be able to go through Spiritual DNA here literally in the past 6 months. And our sessions were a little unique. Usually Spiritual DNA is an online course and we do live workshops, but we over about a 6-month period hung out with a couple of other dudes and just had some 3 or 4 hour hangouts and unpack some of the results. And it was a unique way that we went through Spiritual DNA, but man, I love those times. And it was, I think, just cool to see how having more than just maybe a 5 or 6 minute conversation about something, to have a 2 or 3 hour conversation really helped us unpack some stuff. But I'm excited to dig into your results in the journey you've been on. And Matt, you've just made a pretty big change in life. You just changed jobs. And we want to unpack that in this episode too, because I'm finding that more and more that's happening and has happened with people that go through Spiritual DNA. It's not a guarantee. I'm not telling somebody that if you take Spiritual DNA, be careful because you're going to quit your job. Right. But it happened for you, and I want to unpack that. But sure. And I'm just excited to have you and see where the conversation goes, bro.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I appreciate it.
So Matt, let's start. For one of the things we talk about all the time at Spiritual DNA is that we know that everybody wants their life to matter. We have that sense, and that's because we've been created in the image of God. He's created us for belonging. He's created us for significance. And so you and I were actually going through another men's discipleship deal when we talked about jumping into Spiritual DNA. And we were golfing, I think, one day, and we were like, you know what? I think we're going to maybe take a pause from this. And we were talking about Spiritual DNA as we were probably shooting 8,000 on the golf course. At least I was losing a lot of golf balls. Yeah. But what was it that kind of drew to say, you know what, I think I want to jump into this? And was it something that was a drive to know that you wanted to know that your life was being lived the best way it could be, that it mattered?
Yeah. I mean, well, like you said, we've known each other for quite some time, and I've been doing, my personal research on who Daron Earlewine is and what he's about and what he's been doing. So I've been on the Blackbird Mission website and checking into things. But I was really drawn to what you had going on and, what you were promoting. And it's something that I wanted to talk to you about anyway. It just happened to work out that day on the golf course. I had been doing some other discipleship programs, but this one was very unique and something that I knew I wanted to get involved in and be a part of.
You're very dedicated to personal growth, though, Matt. Though, I mean, you've been doing a lot of leadership development, life development stuff. What is it for you that has driven you to do that? Because that's not normative. Not a lot of people. The majority of people don't necessarily self-invest in the way that you have. So, what is it? What is it for you that's driven you to do that?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. I mean, I think my entire life, if I were to put a pin in it, it would probably be driven or be derived out of being an athlete. I started as an athlete at a very young age, and that's what drove me. That's what motivated me. I've always had a coach 6 inches from my face, pushing me to that next rung, pushing me to be a better athlete, be a better person, be a better student, be a better son. So I think that self-motivation or that drive to be better started with me at a very young age, trying to be better at my craft, whatever it was. And that was usually dependent on the season, football season, baseball season, basketball season. And I'm seeing that in my boys now, especially my oldest boy. He's very driven, similar to how I was, and I see him constantly getting work in, perfecting his craft, whatever it is, in that season. So I would say sports. That's kind of where it started for me.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We're going to jump through, and I think maybe now I'll just run down through your spiritual DNA, profile, and some stuff's going to jump right off the page here as far as fitting directly into what you just said. And that's one of the things I love about going through spiritual DNA and unpacking results is these this design, the way that God has created you, both from your mind to your spirit to who Matt Griffey is. The cool part about it is that it's literally a part of your physical and your spiritual DNA. Like, this isn't something you're trying to become, or you're trying to fake or trying to get to. Like, these traits, this design has been within you from the day you were born. And I love that part of it. And you could definitely see it early on in your life, like you talked about. But if you go through, we'll start with your fivefold ministry function, or your voice in God's kingdom and just in the world. And yours came out as a teacher apostle. And so, teacher apostle, I want us to dig into that because those are real close. But teacher apostle, your pathways are naturalist and contemplative. And when you said that, man, I remember us talking about this before. One of your greatest hobbies is you're like a certified deer steward, basically, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's deer steward through the Quality Deer Management Association. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, how much of your life have you spent out in nature? And I mean, I know this year when you missed it because we were coaching football together, you missed deer season, and I could tell every time we talked about it, like you grieved that.
Oh, it's been such an important part of my life for so long. October 1st comes around. Well, before that, but hunting season starts October 1st. And my wife knew who she married when she did that. October rolls around, I'm in the woods from October to December.
Yeah.
And, life changes. I have 3 young boys now, and they're the most important thing to me right now. I mean, family, faith is all right up there. But, my gears have shifted into it's not so much about me anymore. It's not so much about me finding the woods and getting that time. It's more about the boys. But yeah, you're right. That time was more than hunting for me. It wasn't about going out and killing an animal. That was actually at the bottom of my list. It was out there enjoying nature, enjoying what God created. It was time for me to spend. I'd spend hours on the stand, and you think about everything when you're sitting 30 feet in the air, you're by yourself. It's an amazing time to reflect. So I'd spend a lot of that time praying, for different things. Just praying for animals to come by, for one, but but praying for everything, people that were in my life and everything. So it was a way for me to find God 30 feet in the air. It was amazing. It
When
still
it
is.
comes to that, Matt, there's no substitute, and I try to make this clear with folks, is that there's no substitute for time in the Word of God, right? Because if we want to know what God's saying to us in our life and when He's guiding and directing us, we have to know what He's already said, right? And then God's never going to contradict Himself, and so there's no substitute for finding ways, whether you're reading it, whether you're listening to it, to consume the Word of God and spend time with God through being in the Word, being in the Bible. But
Mhm.
oftentimes I find people feel like that's the only thing that counts, right? Like, if I don't enjoy being by myself in my prayer closet, reading a ton and memorizing the Bible, then I must not be very spiritual. And that's the thing I love about Spiritual Pathways, is it helps us see that that's absolutely not the case. So
Right.
before you knew this, I mean, you've already kind of said it, you connected with God in that way, but did you ever feel like that time in nature didn't necessarily count, or has it always felt like you, like, man, this is where I am going to connect with God in special ways?
Yeah, that was kind of always my place. I think everybody has their own special time and place. Some wake up early in the morning and do their morning devotion. Some do it late at night. Some take walks. Some, I think that's kind of was just my place. And it wasn't on purpose. I didn't, when I grew up, my dad wasn't like, "Hey, let's go hunting and talk to Jesus, talk to God." That wasn't what we did. We went out and hunted, but through my own self-guided path, that's just where I found him, right? Because I would sit there and, I find him other places too. But that was my time. I would get up in the tree, I'd hook up my safety vest, I'd sit there and take a deep breath. And it was like, okay, I found just peace to where I could just go back to ground zero and just be Matt.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love it. So those are your pathways. Personality, you're an ENTJ, so you're an extroverted, intuitive thinking judger. There's an interesting connection there right away you see between the fact that you're a T, you're a thinker, and your other pathway being contemplative,
Mhm.
which is interesting too, because you look at that as far as your education, higher education, and original career path, was as an engineer, which is a
Mhm.
very, I think, cerebral career path, and you did great in it. Here's the I think the bread and butter here that I love as far as your strengths, Matt, and it's where I want to talk about being able to decipher a little bit if if either teacher or apostle is more of your base function, because I know they're close in the assessment. And this is key, and this is why I love doing these Zoom sessions for spiritual DNA. Is the assessments you take in spiritual DNA are absolutely fallible, right? They're just
Sure.
tabulated the information that you put into it. And so, if you've gone through spiritual DNA and you look at it and you go, man, that doesn't feel quite consistent by the results I'm getting out. What I hope these sessions will help you do is to see how you can see a consistency as you go through the results. And if there's a major inconsistency, you probably maybe didn't know yourself well enough, or answered in a way that was outside of who you are. And so I hope that's something that gives you clarity as you watch these sessions. But it also helps to be able to sit down with somebody like Matt and I are doing, to be able to mine in a little bit and go, man, I think this is more consistent. So that's just an encouragement for folks that may be going through this in their own way. But Matt, your 5 strengths are competition, and it's been a while since I talked to somebody whose number one strength was competition, which is huge as far as the drive in your life. So competition, focus, restorative, significance, in command. And within the strengths assessment, there are 4 different domains, and all 5 of your top 5 strengths themes, Matt, are in the domains of executing and influence. And so when you look at that, and I'd love for us to kick this conversation around a little bit, is when I see that, and when I see the rest of your DNA, I feel like that most likely being a pioneer apostle is more core for you than being a teacher, just with the of how much executing and influential themes there are in your strengths. How is over the past couple of months, as you've been thinking through that, how does that sit with you?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, my teacher, apostle, evangelist scores were all together. I mean, it was 27, 26, 26. They were all together. And I've taken similar assessments for different careers. And I've had that apostle, or there was another one that had the similar title. I don't remember what the name of it was, where that entrepreneurial um, spirit, that title reigned. It was on top. I think they're, for me, with them being so close, they're fairly interchangeable depending on the situation.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't know. That's with those three, being right close together. I think I use them interchangeably, and it kind of speaks to my career and actually where I ended up, what I'm doing now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's jump into that, Matt, because we know that everyone wants to know that their life matters, but fear is
Yeah,
our enemy, and
yeah,
fear is on the front and the back side of every decision we wish we wouldn't have made, and every decision that we wish we would have made. And I remember, as we're going through spiritual DNA together, you had an opportunity. You were having some frustration at a current job, which you were happy in, doing great, killing it, hitting all the marks, uh, doing well. But something began to stir within you. And as we talked about this in the spiritual DNA sessions, trying to figure out and leaning into that more of that apostolic pioneering gift, you started unpacking how fear was actually beginning to get into that, and in some of your strengths, to cause this to be a tough decision, but ultimately guided you in that. So let's unpack that process of trying to figure out where God had you in this job, and where fear kind of came into that process.
yeah. No, that'd be great. So spiritual DNA was wonderful for me because I had come to this crossroads a couple of times in my career, in my life. I had come to a crossroads where I was feeling um, unfulfilled. I was feeling, I was getting that itch of, okay, I'm in the wrong position. I'm in the wrong career. I need to try something new. And if you look at my LinkedIn profile or my resume, you'll see what I'm talking about. But it was, I got to this crossroads right in the middle of spiritual DNA, and we had talked about fear, and I was analyzing fear, and I uncovered through this discussion, through these gentlemen that we were all with. I mean, we spent a lot of time on me that night. And what we talked about was, just this feeling of underachieving, or the fear of, not being enough. Not being enough was something that I latched onto. And I had this opportunity, and I wasn't looking for it. I'd spent most of my career in engineering and design, and just having that unfulfilled feeling. Had a talk with a guy, and he gave me an opportunity to try something different. It's completely out of the realm of engineering. It's out of the construction realm, really. Now there's a piece of it that's still construction, but he gave me a shot at something that was new, and I got to unpack this in front of with the group, and we talked about it, and it was a new, scary opportunity that we all worked through together. And through that, I was able to step up to the ledge and jump off and try something new. And it's been wonderful for me. I mean, I've got this new sense of purpose as far as a professional career is concerned. And I don't know that I would have been able to unpack or dive into those details or really uncover what was holding me back, being that fear to try something new. And I think I would have stayed in the rut that I was in. And now I'm in a new career that I really love. I enjoy it. And it's just it follows me home, right? Because you spend a lot of your day at work and with the people that you're working with, and you start your day with a smile sometimes, and you end your day with, you're upset, but doing what you love, doing what you're passionate about. I was able to find through spiritual DNA, and now I come home. I'm a better man, a better person, better dad to my kids.
So Matt, when you talk about your LinkedIn profile, was there can you see a timeline with job changes or anything? Like how long were you at your last job?
So I was a retread. I came back. My last job I was at almost 4 years, I think. And I'd been there one time before.
For how long?
3 years.
And then prior to that, how long were you at somewhere?
A couple of years. I don't recall. I followed my entrepreneurial spirit one other time, and ended up parting ways on good terms, but just wasn't the right fit for me. I
want you to know this, Matt, because I've seen this in a lot of apostolic pioneering leaders. I just got off the phone, had a Zoom call last week with a great leader, a friend of mine, super apostolic guy out in Sacramento. And we had the same conversation that the longer you live, what I want you to notice is it seems to be that you probably have about a 4 to 5 year time frame for you to be okay with a current challenge and a current opportunity. And it's really insightful to know that, because, and it's not a bad thing. It's something I've had to realize. I have about, and it's interesting, maybe we need to do some research on what's this 4 year mark about, right? But it's the same exact thing with my buddy out in Sacramento. He says, I just know, and he's like, my wife knows it now, that I can do something for about 4 years. And then that entrepreneurial drive, it stirs, and I have to find something else. And so that's something to take a look at, even as you're stepping into this opportunity and I think any opportunity for you, Matt, and for somebody that like you, you're going to need to find career paths that allow you to in some ways reinvent yourself or the role every 3 to 4 years, or you're going to drive yourself crazy.
Right. No, I agree. And I think the results from my assessments would speak to that.
So let's talk about the competition part. And because I think there's a connection there, Matt, of that sense of not being enough. And one thing that I've experienced and tell people a lot of times is that usually our greatest weaknesses are hidden in the shadows of our greatest strength. Right. So it's like your greatest strength is you on 10. Some of your greatest weaknesses are you on like 13. Right. So it's the same strength, but when it goes too far, that's where there's those shadow strengths, where it can be the things where fear, sneaks in, where it can be things that bring dysfunction or, within our life. And so it's interesting because I think there's a connection there with your number one strength being, competition. There's that drive. And I would think it's like when you're nailing it and it's a bullseye for you, it's like, yes. But it seems to me like the whispers of fear, right, are always here in the shadows of like either you're not going to be enough, you can't do it, and sowing in some of that self-doubt. Is that a connection that you would say you'd made?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that voice is in my head constantly, and you're always trying to punish that voice, right? And beat it. But yeah, I mean, you're constantly, whether it's your own internal voice, whether it's somebody around you saying you can't do it or you can't do something. I mean, that fuels competition, right? At least for me, that's how I'm wired. So, those negative voices, those doubters, your internal doubt, all of that fuels that competition, that competitive spirit that's inside of me.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think it was Henry Nouwen that talked about the three core lies that we all struggle with, and this is something I think we kicked around in some of our DNA sessions, right? But they are, and it's always an attack on identity. And anytime that the enemy tries to come and derail us from pursuing the purposes that God has for us in this process of becoming who we're born to be, he's always going to attack our identity first, and those come through false, fear-based identity lies. And the three core ones are this: I am what others think of me. I am what I have. And the one that I think probably applies, I know it applies to me, and I think it applies to you, Matt, is I am what I accomplish. And that's, what gets driven back to that performance-based, structure. What were some of the things that have helped you begin to replace, and through this process, to help you replace that lie with truth, that you're so much more than just what you can accomplish?
Yeah, that's a dandy question, because you're right. Everything to me has always been reaching for that next rung, whether it's, starting in grade school where you're trying to make the A team, you're trying to start on the A team, you're trying to make varsity team, you're trying to get a college scholarship, you're trying, for me, it's been slowing that down and focusing more on family and kids, right? It's taking being the man, being the image of God, being the image of a man that God wants me to be for my boys, right? I want to show them what a godlike man looks like in today's society. Because I think it's lost. I think it's going away to, if my boys aren't following me and I'm, acting like a godlike man, who are they following? They're following another leader that I wouldn't approve of, of them idolizing, of them trying to be like. So for me, it's being that image of a godlike man for my boys, being that role model. So that's kind of, I guess, shifted gears to where, maybe it's not that next rung, or maybe it's not that next achievement or that next title or the next mark in society where I think I should be. It's being that guy, being that dad for my boys.
Yeah. One of the things that I want to encourage you with, Matt, is one of the things that I think is so cool in Jesus's life is the story of his baptism, right? Is Jesus has all of this potential. I mean, he's fully God, fully man. We can't even really wrap our mind around that, right? He has all these gifts and abilities. When we talk about, apostles, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher, Jesus is the ultimate example of all of these. Like he's Jesus, right? And one thing I love about that scene when he's baptized is he's baptized and he comes up out of the water, and this voice from heaven, the voice of the Father says, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. And the thing I love about that, and one thing that I want you to hear today, man, and so often I got to remind myself of this, is like the Father was telling Jesus and telling the entire universe, this is my son, and I am unbelievably proud of him. And he hadn't done anything yet. You know what I mean? Like, he hadn't done any of the Jesus stuff at this point. He had done no miracles. He had done nothing that you'd be like, the drive that we have. I mean, for you, like the competition, the focus, the command, like this achievement drive that God has given you, to be able to rest in the fact that, and maybe it's you sitting 30 feet in the air on a tree stand, to be able to hear the voice of the Father for him to say, listen, this is Matt Griffey, and you're my son, and I'm proud of you, and I'm pleased with you, and I love you, no matter what you accomplish and before you ever accomplish. I don't know. I hope that's good news for you today, dude.
No, that is good news. I mean, that ties right into the fear that I just explained, right? Underachieving or not being good enough. Whether it's a husband, a dad, a son, a brother, a co-coach. It's those are inspiring words, and I appreciate it.
How are you trying to sew that into your boys right now, Matt? As far as both you and I are driven. We coach our boys. We want them to be the best they can be. But what are some ways that you're trying to help them understand that your love comes into their life? That it's not performance based. What are some ways that you found that's working? I know that right now your oldest son's only 9, right? So you're still on the front end of this parenting deal. You're not having too many identity shaping conversations with your youngest son, right? He's
Right.
Crew's a little guy. But how are you starting to see that in your role as a parent?
Yeah. So, I mean, Ty and I, my oldest, were, and Jace too, my middle, he's getting in big into sports. Sports obviously played a big part of my life. And if I understand your question correctly, what I'm trying to do and what I've really been trying to work on is separating the sports and the competition and that side of our life together, separating that from our personal relationship and our relationship of being father, son. And I've really caught myself at times, and I've had others. I think you've come to me and said, "Yo, man, chill out," and I appreciate that, because it's not over the top where I need to be worried or anything, but it's just like the competition in me comes out in them, and I'm like, "Come on, you should be doing this, you should be doing that," and then when you throttle me back, like, "Dude, he's 9," I'm like, "That's right, he's 9," but separating that competition, that side of our lives, and being father, son, playtime. Let's go build a fort. Let's go, as Crew would say, raceal in the living room. Let's go be, father, son. Let's keep our relationship separate, as far that side of our relationship separate, where there's a time to work hard and there's a time to play hard and love hard.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah. I think it's key. And I think that's, the thing that, I remember a mentor of mine said, before Julie and I had any kids, they said, just remember, and I don't know if it was an original thought with him, but he said, just remember, more is caught than is taught, and
Right.
so, our lives are viral. You know what I mean? Our kids, people around us, they catch, who we are. And I think that's the encouraging thing as all of us look through our spiritual DNA to realize, like, this is who, God's created you to be. And it's beautiful and it's good. Like, there's so much goodness in all of this. And to know that, like, your boys are going to catch competition. They're going to catch focus. They're going to catch the restorative heart that you have, right? They're going to catch these, I mean, obviously even in, even the hobbies that you have and your naturalist drive to be out, like, they're going to naturally catch those things because of who God's created you to be. And I think I love what you're saying is the balance that, there's no doubt they're going to catch the idea of competition, but be able to come behind that and encourage them that, and I think share with them the journey that you're on, that it's like, yeah, it is about achieving. It's about, there is a competitive side, but what you're learning from God, or what you're learning, in your own life, that, the relational element is the foundation. You know what I mean?
Right.
That, you're loved before you perform. And I think those are those moments where it's like, you could go 0 for 4 in a game, but we're still going to go home, or we're going to wrestle. We're going to have fun. Like, my approval and my affection, for you is not based on that side of it. And,
Exactly.
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's a beautiful balance. And I think it's a tough one too.
It is tough. I mean, like we've been talking about, competition fuels me, and, you don't want to, I don't want that to come between me and my family, between me and my boys. Right. So I'm new in the fact that my oldest is 9 and just now starting that part of his life. Right. He's getting into competitive baseball and competitive basketball. And, so that inner fire in me wants to immediately rear up when I see a scoreboard that actually they're keeping score.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, we got to win. And then but finding that, that separation that, it's okay if he doesn't win, I'm still his dad. He's still my son. And that relationship is going to carry the rest of our lives, and it's got to be
Yeah.
strong. And it's, it's all good.
What I want to encourage you to, Matt, is I was just on a call with someone, yesterday that was talking about that their spiritual DNA results. They've had to continue to go back and reference them because they have actually the knowledge of knowing who God has created you to be. It has allowed them to be able to go through the different challenges of life, whether it's parenting or marriage or friendship, and realize. I guess what I say it's to make sense, whether it's your strength or it's a weakness. A lot of times I feel like we're not sure. Like there's I guess the phrase is there's a lot of times we have unconscious competence and we have unconscious incompetence, right? Like I don't really know what I'm good at, and I actually don't even know what I'm bad at. Like there's just a lack of self-awareness.
Right.
And when I think, is what you're just unpacking, and what I love for the way that God's going to continue to just, bring an awakening and enlightening to you is like, when this is who God's created you to be, it's no longer unconscious. You're like, I know that these are strengths. I know this is how God's created me. So, I can look for those in the positive areas, and I can know that here's how I bring my best to my job. Here's how I bring my best to my family. Here's how you guys get all the good stuff from me. I think the other part that's also great is to realize, like you're going to be 10 times a better dad because now there's a level of where you're not unconscious to some incompetence in that, to go, okay, that is my strengths. This is what it is. This is how it can go too far. Now it's not a mystery. You know what I mean? You can go into parenting with such a level of intentionality, all the way through. And I love that for you. And that's, one of the joys I get to be your friend and be the older dad, right? With my youngest being the same age as your oldest is. It's a joy for me to get to walk this journey with you and with other dads and say, man, I tell you, when we don't want to have this awakening when our kids are 25 and we've blown it, right?
Right.
We want to have these moments where it's like, man, I know who God's created me to be, and I'm taking every advantage in every moment of these moments I have to show them what it means to be a godly man, show them what it means to be a godly father, godly coach, and you're doing it, man. And it's a joy to walk the journey with you, Matt.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I do.
So the last thing, and we'll wrap up, man, is the last, statement that we say a lot through spiritual DNA is, the three statements. We know we want your life to matter, that fear is your enemy, but when you know your worth, you really will start to change your world. And that's what we've started unpacking, even just in this session. But what's another place right now, Matt, that you've started to see understanding your worth and the way God's created, that it started to change your world? I used to say it in more grandiose ways, right? You can change the world. And then I realized I'm not sure we can do much for Cambodia or maybe even Florida. Like, I don't know what we can do to change the world. That's not a promise that we can make. But I know that when we know our worth, it starts changing our personal world. And so often that's defined in our relationships. So what's another way that you're starting to see that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, it's just everyday interactions with friends and family, right? Being able to just kind of study the way that God made me and the way that I'm wired helps with everyday interaction, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's with my relationship with my parents, with my sister, and just friends. It changes the way that you approach people. In the way, like me, I'm a very intense person. Clearly, all this competition and all this, drive exudes when not just normal everyday interactions with people, right? So, knowing that, being able to recognize that, being able to throttle back when I need to throttle back or amp it up when I need to do that is helped. Just my everyday interactions with people and how I address and communicate and talk with different types of people and people that are wired on the complete opposite end of the spectrum than me. I know that I can't come at them with a raging competitive attitude, that I have to, find balance between the two sides of the spectrum. So I say just everyday interaction with the different types of people.
Yeah. I love that, Matt. And that's one of the things that sometimes we'll use an assessment from Giant Leadership that's called the Five Voices. That's very similar to the one that we take here on DNA that goes through the fivefold ministry functions. And one of the things that they talk about in Giant Leadership is that your kingdom voice. So you being either a teacher, apostle, or apostle teacher. And so the words they use is either pioneer or guardian. But they talk about that apostle, that pioneer voice. Part of the great process of uncovering and discovering this stuff is you start to understand what it's like to be on the receiving end of your voice, right? And they talk about that like a nurturer shepherd, they've got a very, very quiet voice, so they have to learn that they've got to speak up for their needs because they're very gentle and they nurture, which is great. And to be on the receiving end, a conversation with their nurturer is refreshing, and it's like, wow, that's I'm just so glad they were able to share that with me. The interesting thing they talk about with an apostle, pioneering voice, we're kind of like a bullhorn, right? Or they talk about, we're almost like a bazooka. And so we have to be careful, when we come into a conversation, that to be on the other end of us, sometimes it's like, listen, this is going to be real loud and it's going to be coming at you full force, And so that definitely, shifts in how we know how to show up and how to love people well by understanding that about ourselves, and so that's cool to see that you're seeing some of that even in your everyday interactions, and it equips you to be the best you can be, and I think it equips you to love people well, to know that you could probably bulldoze people and come in and just, we're going to make this thing happen. And there are going to be seasons of life, right, where that's exactly the play that needs to be run, to get the best out of people. And it's one of the reasons you are a great coach. But I think it's cool to begin to understand these things and allow God to give us insight so we can know, like, okay, now that I know this, like, this moment is I can be on 10, this moment, well, I have to turn the volume down,
Right.
But I think it's empowering to know that, so you can know how you need to show up in which environment you're in.
Yeah, right. And I use those tools, Daron, because I am the best motivational speaker on our team. Everybody knows it. Ask all of them.
Matt and I have an ongoing debate, is that if you've ever coached, especially baseball, the between inning, pep talk is so important, especially for, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids.
Huge.
And I don't know, Matt, I think here's what we should do this year for this baseball season. We should we should both wear body cams. We should wear body cams and then record we'll take turns in different games and record all of our mid-inning speeches. And then we'll put it together on YouTube, and we'll let America vote who was the best motivational speaker.
Hey, I tell you what, I'm ready. I'm so ready, because I was already pretty good at it. But with all the sports world being shut down, I've been watching a lot of Little League World Series games, and all those coaches are mic'd up. So they go to the mound and they give their speeches, and they come in from innings and they give their speeches. So I've had some good practice, and I'm more than prepared to take you on.
Okay. All right. We'll go head to head. You'll probably win because your competition. You'll study way more than I will be ready. I'll forget what's happening. Just here's the thing. I'm the older. I'm the sage coach. So I'm going to be that quiet. Don't talk that much coach. Just sitting on the bucket and and let you young guys shine.
Okay.
Oh man, it's so good, Matt. It's been a blast to do this session. I appreciate you taking the time. I know there's going to be a lot of leaders out there. They're going to see this episode and they're going to find themselves in it. It's going to be encouraging to them to take those next steps for them. So I appreciate it. It's a joy. Hopefully, we're recording all of these during quarantine from the coronavirus. So if you see this episode years from now, we'll tell you that story. But I can't wait, Matt, for us to be back on the baseball field or football field or any field, coaching and mentoring and developing these kids. It's a blast, man. So thanks for being on the podcast today. I appreciate it, dude.
Yes, sir. Thank you.